A leading Democrat has joined Republicans in demanding a wider investigation into the case of two imprisoned Border Patrol agents. The call by California Senator Dianne Feinstein comes one day after the release of explosive transcripts from the trial of Ramos and Compean. Those transcripts reveal more about the Mexican drug smuggler who received immunity from the prosecutor for testifying against the law enforcement agents. Casey Wine has the latest for us. Casey?
Well, Lou, it's clear from the Ramos-Compean trial transcripts that prosecutors, defense attorneys, and the judge all believed that Mexican illegal alien Oscar Aldrete Davila was involved in smuggling a second load of marijuana into the United States 8 months after he was shot and wounded by the Border Patrol agents. The jury did hear limited details about the first drug load he was transporting in February 2005, the day he escaped from Ramos-Compean and several other agents. But the judge refused to allow the jury to hear that after prosecutors granted the smuggler immunity, he was tied to a second big marijuana load found at a stash house in Texas. And incredibly, Aldrete Davila had a border crossing card at the time, which was provided to him by prosecutors so he could receive medical treatment in the United States. We have no way of knowing, but it's entirely possible he could have used that border crossing document to bring in the load of drugs right under the nose of the federal government. Very few details of the second drug load are available because the evidence was placed under seal by the judge. But we do know that U.S. Attorney Johnny Sutton, who approved immunity for the drug smuggler, said last month that Aldrete Davila has not been subsequently arrested for drug smuggling. Why he was never arrested for his alleged involvement in that second load is just another of the many questions surrounding the prosecution of this case. Lou?
Casey, this gets increasingly disturbing. Let me ask you, the idea that this evidence was sealed based on the idea that the jury couldn't handle it, I suppose, do we have any sense of what else may be under seal?
We don't. We do know that one of the reasons, attorneys tell us that one of the reasons this evidence was placed under seal was because the case was still ongoing. It was a law enforcement matter. But in terms of what else is there, in terms of who else might be implicated in that, we don't know. We hear rumors from sources involved in the case that the Drug Enforcement Administration, for example, has ordered that its agents not even look into this matter. So it must be sensitive information. But we just don't know, and we do know that attorneys are trying to get that information unsealed as part of the appeal process. So far, no success, Lou.
And last night you reported that this case did not begin in El Paso, but where?
Well, we don't know. We don't know that for sure either, because that information about the possibility that this case may have begun with the Mexican consulate came from the same Office of Inspector General investigators who lied to Congress about another matter related to this case. The testimony in the case was this case started with a Border Patrol agent who was a childhood friend of the drug smuggler, but there are now questions about that as well, Lou.
Absolutely. Casey, if you will, stand by here just
Sure.
for a moment. I'm going to ask us to join us here, Jeffrey Toobin, our senior legal analyst, for his insight. And Jeffrey, let's talk about first the judge blocking the defense from discussing the dangerousness of that specific section of our border, which is among the most dangerous sections along that entire 2,000-mile-long border. What would be the possible reason for that?
Well, the prosecution made the argument that it was irrelevant. And the judge accepted that argument. But Lou, you know, we've talked about a lot of peculiar things about this case. But this Casey's report today really suggests to me the first real chance that an appeals court would overturn this case, because this is potentially so important. The fact that the drug smuggler had a potential second involvement with narcotics after he was granted immunity, and the defense was not allowed to cross-examine about that, that violates or potentially violates a real bedrock principle of criminal trials, which is that a key witness has to be fully cross-examined by the defense. And if that was prohibited, that's potentially very significant.
I'd just like to go to that issue. And Casey, please come in at any point here. According to the trial transcript, Assistant U.S. Attorney Deborah Canoff told the judge, quote, "We basically had to beg him." And we've got a full screen of this there. He didn't want to come and talk to us about this, and so we basically gave him blanket immunity for any drug or immigration crime that he might have been committing on that day. We now know that Aldrete Davila confessed to smuggling drugs across that border 6 days before he was granted immunity. What does that tell us about the prosecution?
It tells us that the prosecution cared far more about prosecuting these agents than prosecuting the narcotics violations and the drug importing that the cooperating witness, the drug smuggler, did. And, you know, that's the kind of power prosecutors have. That's how they chose to wield it here.
Casey Wine?
Well, Lou, there was something else that emerged from the transcripts as well. And part of that immunity agreement was an agreement that Aldrete Davila would not protect anyone else and that he would be truthful in his testimony. One of the government's own witnesses admitted on the stand that Aldrete Davila was not truthful, that he did protect other people. He violated the terms of his immunity agreement, according to defense attorneys, and he was never prosecuted for that either, Lou.
And it appears there are just a host of issues on factual and statements here that are confounding and contradictory.
But what seems to me the most significant is if there was limitation on the cross-examination of the main witness, that is the kind of thing an appeals court would look at very, very seriously.
And meanwhile, both agents, Compean and Ramos, have to remain in prison rather than free on bail while that appeal moves forward.
And it'll be a long time, probably at least a year.
And not a single person, not one person in the U.S. Attorney's Office, not one single person in the Justice Department, not a single person in this White House is trying to do the right thing by these two men. Thank you very much, Jeffrey Toobin, for your insight. As always, Casey Wine for your reporting. We appreciate it. That brings us to our poll question tonight. Are you outraged that the U.S. Attorney had evidence sealed regarding a second drug load that was brought into the United States by the Mexican drug smuggler given immunity in the case against those Border Patrol agents? Yes or no? Cast your vote at LouDobbs.com. We'll have the results upcoming. Next, three of the country's best political analysts join me. We'll be talking about the president's first news conference of the year and Democrats in Congress taking aim at trade practices that are shipping American jobs to cheap overseas labor markets. We'll have that report and cold, icy, blustery winter weather taking a deadly toll on states from Kentucky to Maine. And we'll have the forecast as well, and a great deal more.